we are having a conversation with Dom Leon Davis to chat about what digital voter mobilization looks like right now. Thank you for joining us back, Dom.
No worries. Sorry about that. I don't, this is
Speaking of digital platforms, so,
yeah.
my next question for you is, you mentioned that a lot of our communities, the way that we actually build power is by relationship building, by having those conversations. And we're 12 days away from a really, really consequential election that there's a lot at stake for our communities. And a lot of the organizing that we're doing now has moved online. It has moved digitally to different digital platforms. So in the next 12 days, what should our communities be doing to mobilize our folks?
So I would say probably the two most important things you can do are one, having conversations with the people in your network. I like to always say, like, go to your group chats and like find the one person who's still sitting on the fence about whether or not to vote at all. And the secret here, the secret to this election is that, you know, we are 12 days out, and there really aren't a lot of undecided voters as the traditional thinking goes, as far as one side or the other, or who they're going to vote for. Undecided voters are really, at this point, people who are deciding whether or not to vote at all. And so it's so important that we have those conversations about the importance of voting, and the most important message that we can convey about voting is that voting is power, and that our vote is power, and that it can often feel like our collective or our individual vote doesn't make a difference, but it's about our our collective power. And when we add our vote to the masses, we become that much more powerful of a force. And so, I really encourage people to, like, hit up your group chats, hit up your family WhatsApp, and ask everybody if they have a plan to vote. Ask them, you know, if they are voting, but if they've already requested a mail-in ballot. If they've already requested one, make sure that that they have a plan to either mail it in, and it's a little late to mail it in. I encourage people, if you've already gotten a mail-in ballot and haven't mailed it in, to actually return it to your local board of elections or a drop box if your state has drop boxes. Um, there's a couple of different places you can check vote.org, I believe, to find out where you can return your ballot. But make sure folks have a plan to return their ballot. And if they haven't requested a mail-in ballot, it's a little late to do that. So make sure they have a plan to vote early if their state allows for early voting. And at the very least, or at the, I should say, a last resort should be voting on election day. And so if they haven't made a plan to do any of those or don't want to do any of those, then let them know that, election day, November 3rd, is not when the election is, it's the last day to vote, right? And so
Right.
really just having those conversations and talking about the power of our collective vote and how we have the power to change the future. One of the things I am constantly reminding folks is that elections aren't about picking a savior. Elected officials aren't our saviors. They're not the people who are going to solve all of our problems, but it's about deciding the kind of future that we want to have. Our system is set up, as much as we all want to just go and shake the table and fix everything right away. Our system is set up for incremental change, right? And so, and President Obama literally said this yesterday. Like, it's set up for us to elect leaders who get us closer and closer to our goals each time. And the way that we hold those elected officials accountable is by showing up. When we show up and when we contribute our vote to them, then we can say, look, we got you here. We can either keep you here, or we can find somebody that's better, and we'll do the things that we want to do. We can hold them accountable once they're in office, but in order to get somebody there that's going to listen to us, we have to actually get them there. So I would say the first thing, have the conversations with your friends and family. That relationship that you have with other people is the most valuable persuasive tool that we have. And then the other thing that I would say is, take 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours if you have it a week, and find uh, find a local campaign or local organization that is doing volunteer work, and find a way to get involved. A lot of organizations are having remote opportunities to get involved. Organizations, campaigns that are doing phone banking, texting. My organization alone, I think we're sending like 3 million texts a day to voters,
Wow.
asking them to uh, to remind 3 of their friends to vote, making sure they have the information they need. Some campaigns and organizations are doing socially distant door knocking, where or you go, you drop off a piece of literature, you don't knock on the door, you just drop it, wearing gloves, mask, and then you go to the next house, and that is making a difference. Just getting the information in front of people, making sure that they know, where their polling locations are, because we've had, I think, 20,000 polling locations closed in the last 4 years. People need to know where they can go vote. And
Right.
every state is different. The laws are different.
Right.
And it varies county by county sometimes, and even within a state. Um, so volunteering, get that information in front of people is also really critical.
You were giving us some amazing points, especially now, things that we need to think about during this pandemic, right?
Mm,
We've seen a lot of voter suppression tactics, not only this year, in previous years, and especially now,
mm.
that are playing out well before, the election day. So how can we combat this by mobilizing our communities digitally? You talked about, spreading information about voting and how to vote. And if you have your mail-in ballot, send it back. Or, how should we be mobilizing our communities to combat these voter suppression tactics right now?
Yeah, I would say using your own social media platforms, texting your friends and family, using all the digital tools at our disposal to just do voter education, because that actually is one of the biggest ways to combat voter suppression, is to have informed voters. And so, I'll give you an example. I worked in Georgia in 2018 for Stacey Abrams. It is one of the is like ground zero for voter suppression in this country. Um, and so much of the work that we had to do was actually just letting people know, hey, these are the rights that you have. This is, if you um, go to the polls and they tell you can't vote, you have the right to cast a provisional ballot, which is specific here to Georgia. Some other states have provisionals, but not every state has it. But making sure that folks knew that they had rights when they got to their polling location. Um, and so making sure that people have that information, and even though we fell short in 2018, we were seeing now 2 years later, voters are are so well informed, and folks are showing up and saying, "Oh no, I'm going to stand in this line as long as it takes, even though you've closed down
Yeah.
a bunch of polling locations, and so I have to stand in line longer. I know that I have a right to stand here, and even if the polls are closed, I'm going to stand here until I get to cast my ballot." And you're not going to turn me away just because of a signature error. But I'm going to cast my vote provisionally, and then I'm going to take it to my county board of elections and get it cured within 3 days. I'm going to take my ID and go get it cured. So, having that information, folks know what they need to do in order to make sure their vote is counted. And so, I would say the biggest thing that we can do is, finding the information for your state, your county, the election rules for your state and county, and posting them to your social, and reminding folks, hey, early vote has started, or early vote starts tomorrow. Or depending on the day that you have early vote, if your state has it, letting folks know early vote starts at this day. The hours of operation are from this time to this time. You'll need this,
Right.
and this to vote. Make sure, or if you're voting by mail, make sure that it has the right postage. Make sure that it is in two. If it's one of those that has two envelopes, make sure that both envelopes are there. And if it needs a witness signature, make sure it has that. Just getting all those small details that people aren't always aware of in front of people to make sure that they are well informed. That's the biggest tool in our arsenal to
Right.
combat voter suppression.
Right. And it's exactly that, right? There are folks that may be watching that are like, why is it so hard to vote? There are so many little details that just the things that you mentioned. And, one of the things that we always name is that this is intentional. Our communities, are intentionally left out of this process. And it's up to us to make sure that our communities are included in this process. So thank you so much for naming that and for charging us with that responsibility for our own communities. And I want to go back to this point about conversations and relationships. You mentioned that, the one thing that you would ask folks is to text that one person in your group chat, or that one person that you don't necessarily know if they have a plan to vote. We actually at YP4 just launched a tool to help folks have these conversations. It's a revamped version of our Arrive with 5 tool.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I know, Dom, you remember Arrive with 5 from back in the day. And so what we've done is revamped it to give folks these tools to have those conversations. And we're going to drop the link actually in the comments here for folks can actually sign up, and we'll send you a list of talking points, a list of ways that you can contextualize this election. And, I want to end with this. What are some ways that we can contextualize this election to our communities, and how, if there's one person, that only we can reach, what is the number one thing that we should say to them? And how can we make sure that our communities are engaged in this process?
I think the biggest message that we can get across in this election is that two of the biggest messages we can get across. One, that it's not just about who we vote for president, who we elect for president, but that we have to vote all the way down ballot, that our local elections matter, that the local
Yes.
elected officials that we elect matter because the decisions that they make are the ones that affect our lives most closely. The ones that we see the effects of on a regular basis. So number one, um, you know, making sure that folks know that it's not just enough to go pull a lever for a D or an R or an I or whatever party you're voting for, um, you know, but that, for the top of the ticket, but that you have to, sometimes it's a matter of flipping a ballot over. Sometimes it's a matter of going all the way down a really long ballot or tapping next on a screen if you have a screen voting machine, but making sure that you complete the ballot and that you actually vote for every single office and do the research. I really encourage folks to find their sample ballots, find out who's on the ballot this year, and make sure that they know who they're voting for before they get there. So that's the number one thing that I would want to impress on people about this election in particular. The second one is that, you know, we often, every 4 years, folks will get up and say, "Oh, this is one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime." I would venture to say that this is actually one of the most,
This is actually it.
yeah, like this is actually it. And there's so much at stake. There's so much on the line. The very foundation of our democracy is on the line. Whether or not we choose to descend into an authoritarian, you know, fascist, shell of a nation, or whether or not we choose to right the ship and at the very least put the pieces in place to begin to address the issues that we need to address as a community. We that's what's on the ballot. And I think what I always encourage people is to close your eyes and actually imagine the country that you'd want to see in 30 years. Imagine all the things that you wish to see coming true within our nation. And then take a moment from that point 30 years from now and walk backwards and say, okay, how did we get there? It didn't happen directly in 2020, but at the point 2020 was the point where the two timelines diverged, right? I'm a big, like, I love sci-fi, I love like time travel things, and timelines and all that kind of stuff is fascinating to me. And right now we're at a point of divergence within two timelines. One timeline takes us down a really, really dark path that not a lot of us want to imagine. The second timeline takes us on a point where we begin to put pieces in place and to fix things that are broken. Little by little, we begin to make sure that we have we start to really have honest conversations around racial inequality and racial justice. We begin to have honest conversations about um, the the historic injustices that our communities have faced and the need to to end generational poverty. We talk, we start to put the pieces in place where folks can have, uh, everyone can have affordable health care, where no one has to go into crippling debt in order to get an education. Where, we start to put all those pieces in place. In 30 years from now, when we look at this moment, we can say, oh, we took the right turn as a nation.